Carlos had been working in e-commerce customer support for years, and if there was one thing he knew for certain, it was that flash sales were both a blessing and a curse. They brought traffic, yes, but they also brought chaos. Every time a big discount event rolled out, the store's servers would strain, pages would freeze, carts would crash, and customers would flood in with angry messages. His days would often stretch late into the night, troubleshooting abandoned cart issues and soothing frustrated shoppers. But one night, while wrestling with yet another mess after a flash sale meltdown, Carlos's mind wandered to a simple but curious thought. Who actually owned the little apps that kept these online stores running? The answer came to him not through a colleague or a tech blog, but through a late-night browsing session on acquire.com. What began as idle curiosity quickly became something more. He scrolled through listings of digital products for sale, and that's when he saw it. A modest Shopify app called CartSaver Pro with a listing price of $80,000. It didn't look flashy. There was no hyped-up marketing, no screaming headlines about explosive growth. Just a straightforward pitch, an app built to help online stores recover abandoned carts. He knew from experience that this was a real pain point in e-commerce. The description mentioned it had 450 paying stores and generated $4,200 in monthly recurring revenue. Carlos's mind started turning. Why a Shopify app? For one, Shopify's platform had over 2 million merchants, and getting them to install an app was often just a one-click process. For another, the billing was usage-based, meaning revenue scaled automatically as the merchants themselves grew. And unlike selling physical goods, which involved inventory headaches, customer returns, and shipping logistics, running an app could mean relatively low maintenance, often just a few lines of code to update and occasional customer support tickets to resolve. Carlos dug deeper into the listing. The seller was Steve, a 62-year-old man who had built CartSaver Pro originally to help his daughter's small boutique shop. Now semi-retired and more interested in woodworking than coding, Steve had decided to list the app for sale. The problem? It had been sitting on the market for 6 months without a single serious offer. Carlos was intrigued but cautious. The price, $80,000, wasn't exactly pocket change. Still, something about it felt like an overlooked opportunity. He could see the cracks where value was leaking, and he imagined how a few strategic moves might turn this unpolished app into a much more profitable venture. Negotiations started, and soon they were talking numbers. They settled on a deal structure that minimized Carlos's personal cash risk. Out of the $80,000 price tag, Carlos would put down just $12,000 in cash, 15%. Steve agreed to carry a $28,000 seller note at 7% interest, to be paid over 3 years. The remaining $40,000 would come from a revenue-based loan at 9% APR, with repayments tied to 15% of the app's future monthly recurring revenue. It was a creative capital stack that allowed Carlos to keep most of his cash free while still securing the business. Before finalizing, Carlos conducted thorough due diligence. He reviewed Stripe exports and liked what he saw. Monthly churn was only 2.9%, and net revenue retention was a healthy 106%, meaning the app was not only holding on to customers, but growing revenue from the existing base. He paid $1,000 for a GitHub code audit, which came back positive. The app used a modern tech stack, and there was no significant technical debt lurking in the background. Customer support seemed manageable too, with only about 4 tickets per week. Carlos wasn't just buying the app, he had a plan. His 90-day value-add roadmap was aggressive but realistic. First, he invested in a UI refresh. He found a designer on Fiverr to modernize the look and feel of the app, improving onboarding flow and user experience. The result? Onboarding conversions increased by 18% almost overnight. Next, he introduced tiered pricing. Until then, the app had a single flat-rate plan. Carlos launched a new $29 per month growth plan, adding an A/B testing widget as the premium feature. Finally, he rolled out an affiliate program with a generous 30% recurring payout, which attracted influencers and consultants in the e-commerce space. In just the first month, this brought in 120 new installs. By the 12-month mark, the numbers told a very different story than the one Steve had tried to sell, for half a year without success. Monthly recurring revenue had more than doubled, reaching $8,700. Churn had dropped to 1.8%, and Carlos was spending only about 10 hours a week on the business, mostly on roadmap planning and partner calls rather than firefighting. The operation was lean, efficient, and steadily growing. Then in the 18th month, an email landed in his inbox that made him stop and stare. It was from a Shopify app roll-up fund. They were making acquisition offers and had noticed CartSaver Pro's recent growth. The offer was straightforward, for $18,000, all cash for the app. Carlos ran the numbers. The loan would be paid off, the seller note settled, and after all obligations, he would net roughly $280,000. He thought about the $12,000 in cash he had initially put in and realized the return on investment was extraordinary. Without hesitation, he accepted the offer. Looking back, Carlos saw the journey as a textbook example of how micro-SaaS could outperform a traditional salaried job. not just in income potential, but in flexibility and control over one's time. By structuring the deal creatively, he had protected his personal cash while still taking ownership of an asset. And by making relatively small changes, refreshing the UI, tweaking pricing, and introducing an affiliate program, he had managed to more than double the app's value in under 2 years. What's striking about Carlos's story is how it upends the myth that big wins in tech require building the next unicorn startup from scratch. Here was a small, overlooked app with modest revenue, ignored by other buyers, sitting quietly in a marketplace until the right person saw its potential. He didn't invent anything groundbreaking. He simply bought something underappreciated and made it better. And in doing so, he turned a deal that no one else wanted into a 6-figure payday. If you strip away the details, the principles are almost boring in their simplicity. First, look for markets with built-in demand and low friction for customer adoption. Shopify's ecosystem, with millions of merchants and a one-click install process, checked that box perfectly. Second, leverage deal structures that allow you to keep most of your cash intact while using the asset's own revenue to fund its purchase. Third, identify small but high-impact improvements, whether in product design, pricing, or marketing, that can compound growth. And finally, know your exit strategy from day one. Carlos didn't buy CartSaver Pro without thinking about how and when he might sell it. Of course, not every acquisition works out like this. The story could have gone very differently if churn had been high, the codebase a mess, or if the app had been in a shrinking niche. But Carlos did his homework. He validated that the product solved a real problem, that the existing customer base was loyal, and that there was room to grow. In the end, his success wasn't about luck. It was about spotting value where others didn't bother to look and having the confidence to act on it. Stories like these are a reminder that opportunity doesn't always announce itself with neon signs and viral buzz. Sometimes it's tucked away in the quiet corners of an online marketplace, wearing the digital equivalent of an unremarkable sweater. All it takes is one person to recognize what's underneath, to see the gold in something others have overlooked. Carlos's journey with CartSaver Pro is proof that with a sharp eye, a smart plan, and the willingness to execute, even the most unassuming deal can turn into a game changer. So the next time you're browsing listings for digital businesses, or even just idly scrolling through side hustle ideas, remember this story. Somewhere in that endless stream of opportunities could be the thing that changes your financial trajectory. It might not look glamorous, it might have sat there for months without a bite. But if you can see what others can't, if you can imagine the small changes that will make a big difference, then you just might be the next person to turn an $80,000 overlooked asset into a $418,000 cash out. And if that thought excites you, it might be worth asking yourself, what's stopping you from finding your own CartSaver Pro?